It all depends on the definition of God. What is the definition of God? Supposing the definition of God is a power sitting somewhere hidden from us, but who controls everything, has made up everything, exists in everything, exists in us, but we can't see him. That God you can never see. No human being has ever seen such a God. The only way to see such a God is to become God yourself. Because by the time you're God, there's nobody else at all. Where there is God, there's no one else. He's totality. Therefore, if somebody says, can man see God? The answer is no. But can man see God in some other form than God? But having the same godly qualities? Yes, in the form of a perfect living master. Because he will have all the qualities and awareness, not only qualities. He'll have all the awareness that God has. And yet he is somebody that can be seen. But not in the physical body, not as a being, you cannot see God. Therefore, we have made so many different definitions of God. They are man-made. Every person that I have ever talked to in my life who talks about God has a mental image made up by himself. Nobody has seen God. Nobody has talked to God. They talk to their mind and call it God. Therefore, God cannot be neither seen, nor spoken to, nor realized like this. It's all our mind. Ultimately, even in meditation that people are doing with various masters in this world, they're looking at their own mind and the universal mind and calling it the ultimate God. And say, we found the ultimate God, he was the universal mind. They're still confused by the mind and call it God. So the definitions of God are so different. So in the Indian pantheology of gods, they said, forget about it, we have plenty of gods. We have got Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, we've got smaller gods. We've got a god who has an elephant head. We've got a god who's got a monkey head. We got all kinds of animals. The Greeks had so many. And the Egyptians had even more animals sitting there, giving dictation to other people. Dogs sitting there, and have you seen them? Birds and snakes. They were all conscious gods. In the Greek tradition, the god was always a human being. They never thought God as some invisible being. They saw Hercules as God. They saw these other gods amongst them. They were all human beings. Enlightened human beings were called gods. So definitions of God have changed throughout the ages in different cultures. But the religion, standard religion, makes us believe that God is separate from us, that we have to worship that God, and we can't see him, and we may sometimes speak to him and feel his presence, so they confuse themselves a lot by talking to their own mind and thinking they're talking to God. Saying messages from God come into our head. They're all mind's messages, mental messages. I want to see a single person who gets a message in a spoken word from somewhere beyond the mind. It's impossible. So that's why we get confused by the very term God. So I hardly ever use the word God, you might notice. I say totality of consciousness. There's the creator. We called it God, ultimate God. Now, why do I say ultimate God? Because there's so many gods. When you are sitting in this world and you say, who is God that we worship in Christianity? He is the Lord of the astral plane. Who is the God that the Hindus say is Ishwar, Parmeshwar, Niranjan? He is the Lord of the astral plane. Who is Allah? The Muslims are always saying, who gave us the Anam and gave Quran, the Lord of the astral plane. Why? He's the creator of the whole astral plane, whole physical plane, the creator of this universe. That's the definition of God. He created this universe. It's being created from the astral plane. They don't even have any idea that there's anything beyond that. Then other people say, no, this is not the real God. There's a higher God than that. Who's the higher God? Who created the three universes? Who created time and space? And you go up above to Brahman, and Brahma is the creator, the ultimate God. They're still confused. And I say, no, there's another God higher up. When you have an experience built upon layers of consciousness, every layer creates a different creator and a different God. Not only that, supposing you have no perfect living master, and a master of a lower order, who has thought that the God that we worship in church and temple and mosque, he is the ultimate God, and teaches you to reach the God in the astral plane, you will think you have reached such Kant. There is no way you can find out that there is any such Kant beyond that. Because it's a complete system. You see the Creator, you see the world being created, you see this whole physical world being created from the astral. What else can there be? The mind does not expect, mind does not see anything beyond. Even initiates of perfect living masters, when they reach the astral plane, they think we have reached Sachkhand. The master has to goad them to move forward. This is not it. We have to go forward. But we see the Creator sitting right here. So that's the Creator of this lower universe. There's more than that. There's still time and space. All the gods that we worship are all working in time and space. In the beginning was this, then they did this, then they did that. They took 6 days, 7 days to do this. They did take 1 million years, they took 3 million years. They took 3 seconds. It's all time-created universe. It's being created by those who are within this realm of time. The ultimate Creator, the total consciousness, exists way, way beyond time. Way beyond all these thoughts that we can have. Way beyond the mind. So that's why, unless a perfect living master comes from that totality, we can have no idea whatsoever. And we think that's God when we come to the very first stage. So we ultimately discover there's more and more. And the great master used to take disciples above by telling them, this is not it. Move forward. So at every stage we think we have reached the end and we have reached our destination, and not the destination.
Why is there a need for a guru in our lives? Can one-pointedness devotion to God give us enlightenment and bring us back to our real home?
Yes, if you have seen God, you don't need a guru at all. Whoever has seen God does not need a guru, but nobody has seen God. Ultimate God in Sachkhand, nobody has seen, nobody can see. The only way to know that God is to become God. Because if you can see God, that means you are separate from God. And God is not separate from anything, is total. Nothing is outside of God, therefore how can you see? The only way to experience God is to be merged in God, to become that. Therefore, to say, I love God whom we have never seen, separating Him is the very first error. When you separate yourself from God, you're not realizing what God is. God is total. God is everything. There's nothing outside of it. None of us are outside of it. No individual is outside of it. No seeker is outside of it. God is totality of consciousness. And therefore, nothing can be outside. If nothing is outside, how can you say, I'm separate and looking at God? When you look at something, you make your own God. We have all made our own gods. And we say, we are speaking to God in our head. Do you know who you are speaking to? To your mind. And mind wants you to think it is God. Because mind is acting like God. Mind is directing all our energies outside. As if God is doing that. So we are mistaking our own mind to be God. By saying, I can see God inside, I can speak to God. It's mind's pictures being made up. And nobody is there to tell us that it's your mind. But if you have a guru who has gone above the mind, in his own personal experience, he can tell you, this is mind, this is not God. Therefore, guru is necessary. Without guru, without a living guru, without a guru who can talk to us and say, no, we are always being misled by our own minds. So that is why, to avoid this big mistake of taking mind to be God, we need a living person like ourselves, who can talk to us like we talk to each other, who can tell us, because of the actual experience he is having of being beyond the mind, having merged with God, he is the one who can tell us, this is mind, this is not God. So we need a real perfect living guru in our life.
Question. In my understanding, we can make mistakes and can misunderstand things only because the physical body is blocking full vision and right understanding. According to the Christian mythology, Satan was one of the highest angels, the carrier of light, who saw God face to face, and yet one day he decided to go against his will. In that instance, he became the Satan or adversary of God. We see similar story in the Anurag Sagar, how Kal, after doing devotion of Satpurish for many thousands of yugas, one day decided that he does not like God's creation and wants to create his own, keeping all the souls captive in the 3 worlds. Here is the question. Are these stories telling the reality, or are they just stories made up by people who are stuck in the physical plane? Is it possible to see God face to face, experiencing His goodness, and yet to decide to go against Him?
That's a good question about religion. Every religion has created God, and every religion has created a devil or a Satan. Every religion in the world has done that. Why was it necessary to do that? Because we wanted a good God. We don't want a bad, evil God. Nobody wants. Our life is full of good and evil. Our life is in a duality of opposites. So if we live in a world of opposites, we have to attribute to a creator who should be good. And therefore we have to create a counterpart who should be evil. So every religion has created God and Satan, or its counterpart in other languages. And that was necessary to sustain a world of duality, and this pattern of God and Satan, positive and negative powers, entities, operating this universe has been there whenever the mental creations of the three worlds takes place. The world, physical world, is of duality. The astral world is of duality. Causal world is of duality. These are worlds created under the mind, and the mind creates duality. That means it must have pairs of opposites for every experience. Every experience requires pairs of opposites, including the experience of God. Therefore, you have to an opposite of that. But the opposite was not always created in terms of physical experiences, but also divine experiences. So we made God good, and we made Satan evil. And although we could not say, how did Satan come into being if God has created everything? So we had to inject this new element into our story, that God was all one. Satan was created out of God, was the archangel, was part of the Son of God in Anurag Sagar, and then he became an opposition. We want to give credit to an ultimate creator, and then say there was, after the ultimate creator, a God who had an opposite, and he was Satan, and who was the negative power. He was Kal. So this is a requirement of religion, a requirement of the world of duality. It has always existed like this. So long as we are living in this physical world, our God, which we want to see, should be a good God. So we'll have some chance of seeing a good God, and we can see the God face to face. And that God resides in the astral plane, from where this world is being created, where all the heavens exist. He sits in one of the best heavens. He sits in one of the best heavens. It has been described in different religions in different ways. And in the Hindu lore, is called Vaikunt, the heaven of Vaikunt, where they say Lord Krishna, who they say went to heaven, is sitting there now. Where in the heaven where God is sitting, with place enough for his prophets to come and sit next to him. It's a world of space and time like our world. And it's the place where God can be worshipped, God can be seen, and God can be talked to over there. But then the question will be, is that the ultimate God? How can he be the ultimate God when there are others around him? How can there be the ultimate God when there is Satan sitting somewhere else? When there is a hell sitting right there in the same level, and where an opposite part of God is sitting there. Therefore, then we go back to a higher level and say, no, this is not that. There is something else causing this to happen. And that is how, above the astral plane, where God sits, we go on to find another creative power that is creating even God and duality. But that itself is subject to duality. And that duality is just taking care of what has been happening below it. And up to that point, we feel we found the ultimate, because there the mind that creates this duality here and creates the duality in the astral plane becomes one. And we say that was the cause. The universal mind was the creator of everything. So we find an answer to this question. How did it happen? They all combined, and from there they separated. The archangel who became Satan lived there before he ever came down into the astral plane. And the Kal was sometime there, and he came down below. So every religion has its own story to explain this. And that the universal mind, we say that's the end of the story itself, the end of creation. It is the end of this creation. When a dissolution takes place, the whole creation is dissolved. It dissolves right up to that point. But perfect living masters have told us that even that is just the region of the mind, and the mind is not the soul. Mind is not consciousness. Mind is not the power that makes that God function. Mind is not the power that creates universal mind to function. There has to be some force, some power that empowers all these. And therefore, there's a possibility to transcend that, to transcend the universal mind and discover where this pure soul with none of these things, no space-time, none of cause-effect, no duality at all. And therefore, there is a possibility to go beyond and find there's a power. Whose power? The power of our own self, the power of consciousness, the power of being aware is creating the whole show. And that discovery is a very big discovery to discover that the whole show is set up from a single source of consciousness which lies beyond the three worlds of the mind, beyond the worlds of God and the creator of God. And when you go there, you discover that the soul is higher than that. And the soul was not what you thought. The mind-soul combination was the soul. This mind-soul combination ended at the universal mind in the causal plane, and the soul is separated from the mind and is not a thinking machine at all. It's something that has got intuitive love and knowledge. It's automatically part of something higher. You transcend that and find even the soul is not a ultimate reality. It's just participating in ultimate reality we call totality of consciousness, which cannot be described in any word. So we have used the word, shabad, naad, sound. We don't know what word to use. For want of any words, we are using these words. The ultimate thing that is creating all this down below. There is no call in the ultimate totality. There is no negative power. There is no duality. None of that is a created show for us here at all levels. So when we look at the spiritual scriptures and find the duality between God and Satan, we bait it because we want the good God and not the evil God. That's a good way of looking at it, and that's the explanation given by these perfect living masters about how the setup is done. So that is why we find these opposites, and the opposites are not real. They are also all made up. They are made up at the causal level, and above that there are no opposites. The creative power. I can't even call it God because God comes much earlier. You can see God. You cannot see the creative power. There's no way you can see the ultimate creative power. The only way to experience is to become that. There's no seeing. There's no seeing left at all. No seeing, no separation. If there's no separation, who are you seeing? So that is why the totality of consciousness is what you ultimately discover to be the only true self, the only truth, the only reality is that totality of consciousness, the power that creates all these, including what we consider as God sitting in heaven, or in religions creating this universe, or other term that we give in different religions.